Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of America's Voices. We are so glad you're here. We bring Americans from across the political spectrum to go underneath the headlines and discuss what truly matters today. Now, more than ever, we need grassroots conversation to remind us that we are actually a lot more the same than different. I'm your host, Daniella Bloom. I've been recognized as LA's premier relationship authority, and I'm bringing what I know with relationships, why they make or break themselves today, and seeing some similarities to why our country may be falling apart and hopefully coming together again today. So we have two new guests joining us, and we are so glad to have you join our call too. So with that, Mr. Mark, hello, welcome. New
Thank you. Glad
background.
to be here tonight.
Yes, and you are a
Human being.
your political affiliation, and if you want to
Oh,
say your profession.
I can do both. I don't really
Okay.
have a profession anymore. I'm a Republican. I've been a Republican most of my life. I do lean a little bit for social programs, but I would be considered a conservative, and I have been all my life. My I was in the cable industry for 30 years, and I'm retired from that. And I'm in real estate, managing my own properties, and a study of life is my goal.
Amazing. We are glad to have you. Good to know. Okay, Mr. David.
Not even muted. Yeah, um, I am a Democrat. Been working in the advertising and marketing industry for many years.
Yes, and if you're in the local LA area, David's amazing magazine just dropped, right?
Yes, as we were doing this, I just posted the website information. It just came off the printer and started distribution today and starting really in LA tomorrow.
Oh my gosh, so exciting. So pick up your local, it's called the Matzah.
Yes, the matzah.
The matzah. Yay. And I have an article in there too that I'm very proud about. And I'm glad David asked me to do it. Okay. Mr. Architect.
Hello. So my background, I was born under communism. We escaped to the United States. I grew up in New York as I guess, raised as a liberal Democrat. And so I guess I've been all over the spectrum, and I have a little bit of a background in law.
Amazing. But we are all here now. And I felt like the whole exchange with Cheryl and Sherry and Pierce Morgan and the concept of free speech and racism and personal responsibility, it all ties in together with this incident. And so let's talk about it. So for our listeners, in case they're not caught up, um, a few things happened this week. I will just talk briefly about what happened with the Bachelor. Um, Basically, it's my understanding that Chris Harrison has pretty much lost his job of 18 years, not because he said anything racist, but because he was asking for grace for one of the top contenders of the top contenders of the Bachelor. This Bachelor was a black bachelor, and this was a white contestant. That picture surfaced of her from going to an antebellum party where she was dressed up as a southern in southern gown, and it wasn't but it happened to be the time period of slaves, and so there was some concern of where she stood on that. And Chris Harrison said, you know what, let's give her some grace and let her speak for herself on this subject. There's no use annihilating her and her family. And for that, he was asked to be let go. And he did, well, before that, he had to apologize. I think he did at least 2 or 3 times. And then he took a diversity training class, but it still wasn't enough. And he's no longer hosting the rest of the season. And it looks like he might not be returning. So that was number 1. Number 2 was what happened with Cheryl and Sherry on the talk, which is, it's no surprise that it's a left-leaning echo chamber of ladies. There is no diversity of opinion. there's no conservative voices. And they have been doing the show for quite some time, 11 years, I think, and they've all known each other very, very intimately. But there was an exchange when Cheryl was defending Pierce Morgan, not because she agreed with what he was saying, but she defended his right to freedom of speech because he is also her friend and could not understand why he was also being let go. And for those of you who don't know what he was talking about, it had to do with the Meghan Markle big interview with Oprah, where she brought up, amongst other things, that she was concerned that someone from the institution, as she calls it, the royal family, was asked about what color their baby's skin would be, and she took that to be a very racist comment, although she had admitted that this was not said directly to her. This was what Harry said he heard. So there was no tone and insinuation able to be present for her. And Pierce Morgan said he didn't believe her, and because he doesn't think she's credible in general, not because of the color of her skin. So anyway, it happened on air between Cheryl and Sherry. It got very heated, and it has resulted for the cancellation of the rest of the live tapings for the week. And there's now an internal investigation into that. So, and everyone has seen the clip. Thoughts on these two events right now?
I
Yes.
think I'll just add a fact that I think is critical, is that Chris
Yeah.
Harrison is one of the executive producers on the show. So as much as he'll lose his hosting ability, he stands to profit mightily as long as that show has ratings.
Oh,
And
I
does
did not
well.
know that. Okay, so he's
I
still.
think he threw himself out of the host because the bigger picture is the dollars of the franchise.
But okay, aside from that though, what do you think about him having the pressure to step down as host?
I think it's a matter, I think it's economics. I mean, he wants the show to be successful, get out of, it's sacrificial lamb. You move and you look at the bigger dollar and the bigger picture. The bigger picture is he wants the Bachelor, Bachelorette, whatever, to have not be a condition, and it's been making good money. What is it on its 16th, 20th season? Something insane. And he wants to keep that cow running.
Okay.
So if he steps down as the host, he doesn't lose.
I hear you. So he doesn't lose all his skin in the game because he's still profiting as an executive producer. But the question is, do you agree with the fact that this was made into an issue to begin with? Because what he was doing was asking for grace for one of the contestants on the show.
I have no problem that it was an issue. I think a lot of the guests on the show were the ones who reached out and against him. So if he loses the credibility of the people that he's working with, then he doesn't, if he doesn't have their support.
But how do you, what would make him lose credibility?
His position, his line of reasoning, his judgment.
Okay. Anyone else has other thoughts?
Well, he wasn't judging. It's a matter of, if you're a host, he's been on the show. What you said, 16, 17 seasons or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I think he's doing his job as the host. The host is supposed to intervene. They're supposed to have, as long as he's been on that show, he obviously has some level of power and credibility to suggest, hey, the way that they're treating this contestant is a little out of bounds. It at the end of the day, it's almost like you can't have an opinion anymore. It's like you're only allotted to have a certain kind of opinion that lines up with the current narrative at the moment. And I think the fact that he didn't line up with that is why he got let go.
Yeah. And what you were saying earlier, Taji, I think this will just continue to happen until there's going to be a boomerang.
Here's my question. We go over this a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Was he let go or did he choose to resign? And both sides will take an opinion. He says, he resigned voluntarily. The argument will be, others will say he was forced out and he had no choice. But it was his decision. He could have fought and said, no, I'm not going to go, make them fire me. I mean, he could have put made this the hill that he wanted to stand on. So, I mean, he made the choice. Nobody forced him out.
Well, given the circumstances, it's questionable whether he could have been threatened.
He's the executive producer.
Yeah, but EP doesn't there's people above EP, on those shows like that. So, he could have been, because we've seen that a lot where people have resigned only to prevent the backlash of somebody getting fired for a ridiculous reason. So sometimes, I mean, who knows how many people have we heard that resign when we know they probably had the threat of being fired, but nobody wants that type of backlash when you're being fired for an unreasonable reason.
And Daniel, you were going to say?
I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh. I mean, it's hard to subscribe motive or unmotive about if he resigned or fired without any information, without greater insight. I look at him going, he's the executive producer. He had the job. If he wanted to fight for it, if people believe they did nothing wrong, he could have easily fought. I mean, it's not hard to say, I don't think I protest this. I mean, he would have, if he had the principle, yes, he would have lost money and he could take that risk, but that's integrity and values, right?
Yeah, I am. I just feel like in general, more people should stand up for their stances, and they're just not. And you're right. It comes back down to personal choice, personal responsibility, but we're just seeing this repeated over and over again. I mean, I think, Taji, even you were saying when Sarah Silverman starts to make sense and say, it's just, you can't even have a progressive idea anymore without having everything thrown at you if it was taken in any way the wrong way that it was intended.
Well, we're getting into a place of it's becoming very Orwellian and very sort of totalitarian because, like, when I was listening to Sarah Silverman speak, I said, wow, even Sarah Silverman is thinking, wait a minute, we can't have diversity of ideas, we can't have diversity of ideology, we can't have diversity of thought or diversity of a worldview. It's like if you don't side, we're basically being forced to pick sides. That's what it's coming down to. It's like, pick the side, and if you don't pick the right side, you're done. That's what I'm starting. There's a pattern here that I'm starting.
What did Sarah say?
Huh?
What did Sarah say?
So Sarah Silverman did an interview that went viral where she was just kind of over the attacks, the bullying or the demonizing of not being able to have an opinion or have an independent thought without being demonized for it. And she was basically saying she was kind of tired of it. She was like, how can we have any type of resolution if you're constantly silencing people for having diversity of thought or having a different ideology, is what she was basically saying.
Yeah.
And I don't
know the same thing.
Yeah, I don't always agree with her, but on that note, I went, yeah, I think if we all sat down and had a conversation, regardless of what with your affiliation, I think we would all find that we kind of want the same thing. You might have
But the flip side is, let's move away from a borderline issue and say, let's say he said extremely racist stuff. We wouldn't go, hey, that's a really good opinion, keep it up.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he didn't, though.
He didn't.
No, but the argument that you're making is, let people say whatever, it's all good. No, that's not good either.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we have freedom of speech, and you have a freedom to disagree with it, but you don't have the right to demonize somebody for their speech because
I disagree. I completely want to demonize people who are anti-Semitic. I want to demonize racists. I want to demonize.
I'm just talking about having an opinion. I'm not talking about being anti-Semitic.
That's an opinion.
No,
right?
I'm not. No, what I'm saying, well, what you can define it because you define it a certain way. Because I don't know. I don't watch the show. But what I'm saying is that if he were racist, he would have been fired a long time ago.
Exactly.
I mean,
He
as
already
long as he's
knows.
been on the show, he would have been fired a long time ago.
What about Tucker Carlson? He's still on the air.
What about Tucker Carlson?
I guess a white supremacist.
Okay.
He's
not
okay.
white
No, I
supremacist.
mean, since we're having the conversation, I'm
Yeah.
curious. What has he said that would define him as a white supremacist?
I will. Daniel and I will be happy to bring citations next week because we could easily find them.
Well, this is not what the show. This is not what the show is about, though, because then we get off the issues. Because
Right.
we
Yeah.
could
My point
definitely
is
bring
still,
things.
Interject something.
know.
Can I-
Mark.
Yes.
You know,
Go ahead.
we hear you say you want to demonize everybody with hate speech, yet I don't have a problem with it. I like to listen to Louis Farrakhan, who is anti-white, anti-Jewish. He called us termites. Why do I listen to him? Because I want to know what he's thinking. If I don't get to hear it, I don't know who the enemy to the public is.
but on the same hand, you don't have to celebrate it. You can still demonize him and listen.
And he's allowed to do that.
Who's celebrating it?
Tucker Carlson's not. If you think he's a racist, that's up to you. This poor guy is defending a girl who went to an antebellum party. Do you think that college girl even knew what an antebellum party was? Do you think she associated it with slavery? But yet he gets canceled for having an opinion to stand up for a woman who was guilty without any trial or any information. We are now presumed guilty in this country of being racist, just like Sharon Osborne was accused and Pierce Morgan in England, with no real evidence that they are. It's a personal bias of language that says, up, you're a racist. Up, you're a racist. Up, you're an anti-Semite. Whether it's true or not. People no longer can defend themselves. It doesn't matter. Once you are labeled, you are done.
Yeah, it's an assumption, and it doesn't breed good faith in asking questions.
No, it's not an
and
assumption. It's a
getting
fact.
curious. Yeah.
It becomes a fact. You're a racist. You're an anti-Semite. You're a racist. You belong to the KKK. Tucker Carlson's a racist. Laura Ingram's a racist.
Yeah. And I think for the path of least resistance, people are leaving jobs instead of standing up for what they believe in, because they figure it's lesser of two consequences for them. Mr. Architect, do you have an opinion? Do you have something you want to contribute?
So in trying to figure out what's going on here, I was wondering if we even have a definition of racism.
It's so
So
funny that you should
so that
ask.
we can
I have
know
one.
if we can know whether we fit in the definition of not. So basically we have our criminal law and we have our civil law, and for each wrong that one person may be able to commit on another, we have a very clear definition of what it is. So for instance, a larceny is a trespassory taking and carrying away of the property of another with intent to permanently deprive. And if you're missing one element, then you haven't committed that larceny. So it has to be specific before the government can hold you responsible, or whether you're liable to another party in court. And so
Do you want me to read the definition?
I'm curious to hear which definition you're going to read.
So this is the one I have. I know, right? It's a fair question.
There's so many now.
And they're changing all the time. Okay.
Changing all the time.
Yes. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is minority or marginalized.
Which definition is that?
I just think it was. I think
it changed it.
Yeah,
you know where you got that?
Well, I'll find it. I'll find it out in a second.
Google.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, yes.
I actually looked, and it turns out our definition. Which one was I looking at? So
it's under dictionary in Google.
okay, so I didn't see that one, but actually our definition of racism changed after George Floyd to include, and I don't think that's the Google definition. I think it's Merriam-Webster, but I'm not sure. So it includes being part of a system of oppression. I don't have the exact language, but it's interesting when you see definitions in the dictionary start to change. For instance, in the last few years, we've also had the definition of fascism change on Google Dictionary, Wikipedia, and Britannica, to now be a right-wing phenomenon where it wasn't defined as that before. So definitely interesting to see definitions changing. But going back to my point about specifics, when you have a definition that includes language like being part of a system of oppression, you know, I don't see how anybody could opt in or opt out of that, how you can figure out whether somebody has done anything wrong or not, or does it even require somebody to do something wrong. So I'm in trying to understand this, you know, the phenomenon. I guess I'm looking for specifics. I don't really even know if people have thought of should
Well,
we
and
have a
that's just it.
definition
I
that
don't
we
think it
agree
even
on.
has to fit the definition. You know, going to what with the whole thing with Cheryl and Sherry with that exchange, she literally said, "Tell me, educate me. What did Pierce Morgan say that was racist?" And the response from Sherry was, he didn't have to say anything. It's implied because so many times when it comes from a Black woman, it's ignored. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what I remember. Taji, is that pretty much
Oh, I
the
was
gist?
just gonna
Yeah.
say, let me just read the original
Oh,
definition.
what, you still have an old school like Merriam-Webster dictionary before
I
2020?
have the old grade school World Book Dictionary.
Oh my goodness. Let's
So
hear it.
it says the belief that a particular race, especially one's own, is superior to another race.
What?
And then discrimination or prejudice against a race or races based on this belief. A political or social policy or system against a race or races based on the belief that a particular race, especially one's own, is superior to another race.
Isn't that
That's the original definition of racism.
Huh.
Go back just because I Googled it and found the first recorded utterance of the word racism.
Okay.
And it was stated, segregating any class or race of people apart from the rest of the people kills the progress of the segregated people or makes their growth very slow. Association of races and classes is necessary to destroy racism and classism. That was from 1902.
1902. Wow.
That was the first utterance of racism. For the first time that they found it there.
Interesting. So
I mean, so that kind of, I mean, I think the new definition kind of goes back to the old ones.
So we're not seeing like a trial here. If somebody's accused of racism, we're not seeing, you know, evidence presented and a detailed discussion of here's what you did and here's why we think it's racist, and let the other side present evidence. Here's why I don't think it was racist. Here's, you know, my interpretation or whatever. We're not seeing any of that. It's just sort of summarily decided, right? And the question is,
but not, I mean, but shouldn't we applaud CBS because isn't that what they're doing on The View? They're investigating.
I don't think there needs to be an investigation at all.
Well,
right, what Architect just said, that the beauty is coming up with facts and finding it. So,
well, there's also witch hunting. There's also witch hunts.
Yeah, on the basis, I mean, investigating what's the crime is the question.
Each side has a claim. Both sides have positioned themselves that they were victimized in this thing. I mean,
yeah,
Sharon
but
Osborne has said
how?
that Sharon has aired that the producers set her up by not telling her, and that the questions were staged for a big blowout. The other ones,
she had them on the cards. When they prepare you before you hit the
I'm just
stage.
saying what Sharon said. She said they went in unprepared and that she was not prepared for that question. And I mean, hey, that's why they want to investigate. That's why don't we give them that time? I mean, whatever. Are we dying because the view's not going to be on for 3 days?
The talk, but
The
no,
talk.
no one is
Okay.
dying at
Whichever
all.
one.
I have to make a statement. There's two kinds of racism that we see. One is overt racism and one is covert racism. And overt racism is where you say something that is racist, anti-Semitic, whatever. You say it out loud and people hear you. The more dangerous one to me is the covert one. It's the one where somebody doesn't hire somebody because their name is Wang or Juan or LaQuisha or like my daughter, Naama. So
Pepe Le Pew.
Pepe Le Pew, right. So they don't hire them because of the covert. And how is this helping that? Because what you're going to be doing by hanging all these people is it becomes more covert.
Well, what do you think about Rob Johnson's line this week?
Don't know that I heard it.
Yeah.
He basically said, I felt obviously a senator from, I forget where he is off the top of my head.
Wisconsin.
And he basically said, and I will paraphrase this, I was not worried about the Capitol riot because they were MAGA and police loving people. But if it was Black Lives Matter, I'd be afraid for my life.
Exactly.
Is that not covert racism?
No,
No.
because there was a
I'm sorry,
lot more
what's the big
violence
covert?
in the BLM rioting. How is that racism?
I don't know how that's
Because
race. I mean, I don't know how that's racism when I sat here in
you're looking
my
at me and Daniel who are telling you pure and simple, white people who rioted in the Capitol and with guns and tasers and took it over are peaceful. Black Lives Matter, violent mob who's going to kill them.
But
Let's
wait,
let her-
but
let's let Taji
let's
speak.
put something into perspective here. It wasn't the people at the Capitol who were coming over to my communities and burning down Black-owned businesses. I didn't see people waving American flags running over into my neighborhoods or because I'm from here, I'm a native. I didn't see those people breaking and burning down stores and looting into stores in the neighborhoods that I grew up in. I didn't see those people that they're saying are the terror or the insurrectionists or whatever. I didn't see those people. I saw young multicultural millennials, all races, Black and brown, all races, young, that were burning up cities and burning up towns and burning up my communities that I grew up in.
This is one
That's
of
great.
the most important issues. If we can't get along with each other, then how are we expected as a society to move forward? If we're always finger pointing at each other, calling each other whatever, McCarthyism, racism, go up and down the line, we can never move forward as a society because nobody will put their neck out there.
And that was the gist of Sarah Silverman's interview. That's pretty much, similar to the contents of what she was saying. It was like, if we keep, demonizing people and firing people and canceling people because you don't like what they say because it doesn't go along with the present narrative.
100%.
That's exactly what Sarah Silverman was asking. Is like,
and when and Danielle, I brought that up earlier in the week, and we could take a look at the Bachelorette versus I'm going to call it the View, the Talk, whatever it is. Nothing's happened except they took 2 days off, right? If they take a week off.
Systemic problem in the country. David, it's not the talk show. That's just an example of a systemic problem that we're facing throughout the country.
No. If she got fired for it, hey, let's talk. But right now, they're investigating. If they come back and give a big hug on Monday, are we going to say this was solved or this not solved?
But this started with Roseanne. This started with Roseanne, and it's gone on. I mean, people are getting fired left and right because they pick something that you say that they don't like. It's like, oh, and if you're white, then it's like, oh, well, you there's only so much you can say if you're white. And I hear this from my white friends who are like, well, there's so much that I can say, because if I say this, then I'm going to get tarnished or I'm going to lose my job.
And that's very
it's
sad
happening.
and to be in America and feel that fearful to express yourself without any intention, but how it could be misconstrued the wrong way with repercussions. And I don't know if you guys all saw the last article that I posted from the New York Post about, I think it's Columbia having 6 different college ceremonies,
I
grouping
saw that.
together by race and ethnicity. We are going backwards.
It's segregation.
This is not what Martin Luther King stood for. And we can bring it to a relationship. Let's bring it down to like the nuclear family, or even a husband and wife, right? When you have a bad day, you have a bad mood, you forgot to pick up the dry cleaning, or you had something happen at work, you're not going to be at your best. But you judge people, your spouses, your loved ones, by their character. You take things in stride. And in fact, when someone is clearly deregulated, like when children are deregulated, that's the time to get curious, not to shame further and threaten. And I do think it's a huge sign of the times. It is so easy to cancel, to banish, to fire, than to actually invite conversation, curiosity, and connection. And we see every day a new headline, a further divide, further separation, and it seems like it's only getting worse.
Yeah, and I see it firsthand, just even being in the industry. It's like, I see those headlines of somebody that's getting canceled for something they said they didn't like, or somebody's getting fired, or somebody, I mean, hello, Gina Carano.
That was ridiculous.
And ridiculous. And what she said
Gina
was
Carano.
The thing she said was not even anti-Semitic. They were just looking for an excuse to fire her from the beginning.
Yeah, and it's not something this has been going on for a while now. This isn't brand new. It's been happening for the last several years.
But would you say, Taji, that it's never been this bad in this last year?
Well, it's just gotten worse because, now it doesn't even matter what political party you belong to, because I feel like now we're seeing a power structure shifting, and look, they're coming for Cuomo. Mm-hmm. They're all coming for Cuomo now, and it's like, well, wait a minute, Cuomo's on your team, and you guys are throwing him under the bus now. Yeah. So what it feels like is there's a huge power shift that's happening, and they're gonna throw in all the people under the bus that they can to get, if you want to just say it, New World Order.
Does everyone agree that there's a cultural shift going on right now? And if so, how would you describe it?
Yes.
How would you describe it? How would you say what it is? And, just curious what everybody thinks of, is there some kind of cultural shift going on right now?
I think it's problematic that Cuomo is a sexual predator.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I think it's problematic.
I'll answer that. I do not think there's a cultural shift.
I couldn't hear what Daniel said.
Daniel said, I think that Cuomo is a sexual predator. That's what you said.
I think that's a problem if that's what he is.
Yeah, if that's a problem. Okay. But did you want to answer?
Well, he's not being thrown under the bus. The guy is not right. That's not, we can't accept that in our society.
Well, I don't want to give off a tangent about Cuomo, but we all know he should have been long gone with the nursing home deaths, and that the whole sexual conduct is just to get the media off the hook for not properly covering.
It's a cover. It's a cover.
But let's answer.
I don't buy that. Nobody wants to cover. That's what being a sexual predator. It's a weird cover.
No, we're talking about the sexual predator. Is the narrative is the cover, the fact that he mishandled the nursing.
Right, I'm saying there's other things that you would go with besides being labeled a sexual predator. I don't think that's.
Well, that's what they're going with.
You asked the question.
Why can't they be going with both?
Is there a cultural shift? And Mr. Architect, excuse me. And I think in some respects there is. If you read anything about the World Economic Council, the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab's book, and the World Economic Council, they are pushing for a tremendous new world order. I don't know if, like a Gina Carano, the guy from The Bachelorette or Bachelor, whatever, I don't watch those shows. Are they sacrificial lambs to prove how woke the companies are while they go on doing exactly what they're doing? Because reality TV is just exploiting people. Or is there a real cultural shift? I don't know yet. I think it's too early to tell.
I'll say from my perspective, the cultural shift is no different now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Our cultural things, we always change, we progress, and we alter. I would say 80% of us are in that middle band that are moving along like our great grandparents did, and as our grandchildren will do. There's not that much difference in there. It just the edges may be different on the far right and far left, and there's a lack of a voice in media for middle ground because sensationalism sells. So I think we see the edges a lot more, but I think most people are in the middle and go on with their daily lives.
No, I think if you look at the new Great Reset and the New World Order, the World Economic Council, you'll see that they want to make a shift. I just don't know that it's that easy to do. And I think I'm going to prove I'm woke. I'm going to use a sacrificial lamb. But really, capitalism is going on as it is. There is a new form of capitalism called B corporations, which are people, planet, and profit. It's a balancing act, but not enough of them are around. And I think it's going to take a shift, but I don't know that we're having that shift now. I think we're talking and we're protecting our turf and we're using sacrificial lambs. And I don't think we're moving that far either in any direction. And as we keep fighting with each other on such things as you're a racist, you're an anti-Semite, it becomes impossible to shift the culture because people are not talking to each other. They're just bitching about each other. They're burning each other at the stake.
Yes.
But isn't that the shift in the culture where we can't have the conversation anymore? I mean, you can't. Like I said, in my industry, I know people who will inbox me and they're like, I'm so glad that you're not afraid to speak up, because there's people who are afraid to say what they want to say. They're afraid to take a stance.
But is this new? It happened in the 50s. It happened in the 60s. It happened in the 70s.
No, but not to the point where you get fired.
McCarthyism wasn't to the point?
No, I'm talking about where you cannot even have an opinion. You cannot express yourself.
Tell that to Hollywood during McCarthyism. You couldn't write. You lost your jobs if you.
Well, this is what I'm saying too. It's almost like history is repeating history.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Itself.
That's my point. Is that we always do this.
But it's worse.
We're just living. No, it's only worse because it's happening to us.
It's absolutely worse.
Not only because we're living it.
Communism. You were tagged as a communist.
Right.
Okay. Lucille Ball was one who was tagged as a communist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But that wasn't a racial issue. And it was just the Senate going after famous people, right? Now we've got everybody in a work environment afraid to talk.
And I want to add to that. I think you only need to look to the public school curriculum, where you do see what I think is a huge cultural shift. I mean, we talked a little bit about this last week with critical race theory. It's a very different approach than celebrating diversity and multiculturalism, which I'm completely for. Critical race theory, its root is to, teach about the oppressed and to be and to empower the former oppressed, so they're and go against the oppressor. And it's a very anti-American.
It's not anti-American.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we talked about the Reconstructionist history, and when did America really start? Was it 1776? Was it 1619? There is a shift, and it's what I feel, and I told this to Mark before. You look at two different types of parents. You look at the permissive parents and the rigid parent, and I think for a long time we were ruled by the rigid energy, right? Like the Christian, and so the woke and the progressives and testing the boundary was the minority. Now I think it's reversed. I think the progressive parent, the permissive parent with no boundaries for their kids, be inclusive, be who you want to be. I'm not going to tell you no, and I'm going to create safe spaces for you wherever I can so you can express yourself. When we see that, as parents, these children are craving boundaries, are craving structure, are craving some sort of institution to believe in. And again, I think it is the pendulum has shifted, and
And
I know it will shift
those-
back. I know it will shift back, but I do think there was a cultural shift.
When those are the kids that you're seeing out there that are doing the autonomous zones, the Chaz, the like the father whose son, he allowed his son to go hang out during the, in Chaz, the autonomous zone. And I don't know if anybody saw the story, but he was shot and killed.
I saw.
The kid that was shot and killed. And
So was
that's
the kid in Wisconsin, where his parents gave him a gun and said, go protect. I wouldn't call that good parenting either. I mean, I think we could take both sides of that.
no, I'm talking, this was a young black kid. This was
I'm talking a 17-year-old white kid, same thing.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Kyle Rittenhouse?
Yeah.
Well, he went out to perform a service.
Yeah.
Whereas this kid
Would you call that good parenting?
to perform a service to help.
To send a 17-year-old with a loaded gun into a protest?
Well,
Is that
you
good
have to
parenting?
remember, he was going into a very hostile environment. He was there. If you read what he was there for, he was there to help protect businesses.
Don't care. I'm talking about parenting.
Okay, but you don't know how he was raised versus how I'm just talking about what Daniella is talking about in terms of the cultural shift, where we've got these kids now who think that they are empowered by going out.
I think a 17-year-old with a gun going to a protest feels pretty empowered. How is that not falling into what you're saying?
Because I'm not finished with what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that what Daniella is addressing is these kids, especially your millennials, your college age kids, they're being indoctrinated with this ideal that if you that you are empowered by protesting and going out there and like you take, for example, the boy that I was talking about that was shot and killed.
Millennials are no longer college kids. I just want to make that clear.
Gen Z.
Well, Gen Z, just between those two, they're being encouraged and they're being told that, you have a right to go out and express your anger in this manner. I mean, they were interviewing all these kids that were out.
That's the history of our country.
Huh?
That's the history of our country.
It's the right to protest.
Right.
Okay, there's a difference between the March
Protesting
on Selma.
and taking a gun and shooting somebody at a protest. Yes, you're right.
The March on Selma was a protest.
Okay.
What happened last year when buildings and the entire states were set on fire, that's a riot. That's a violent act. That's an act of violence.
I'm not saying that didn't happen, but that's a percentage. And there were also thousands of Black Lives Matter protests that were completely peaceful.
I'm sure there were. I'm just talking about what we all witnessed on television.
But
we're talking about
you witnessed at the Capitol.
Sorry.
Don't try to throw it back, Daniel.
You witnessed all that, and you didn't witness any of the peaceful.
How many buildings were burned down?
How many?
Wasn't really covered.
We didn't
No
witness
businesses.
business being set on fire and
Right.
Molotov cocktails thrown into
No,
buildings.
only the U.S. Capitol was defecated on.
Right.
That's
But-
okay.
Well,
We don't
that
have
got
that.
far more coverage than what actually happened.
But was the U.S. Capitol set on fire though?
No.
Were buildings burned down?
What
No.
does that
Give
matter?
it time. I'm sure if they had more time, it would have.
Nah.
Oh,
No.
Why not?
Well, that's
That's
the
a big
distinction.
valid
If you
point.
set something on fire, it's bad. But if you don't set it on fire and you bear spray somebody, then it's good.
Well,
They
no, that's
destroyed
not
all
what we're
I
saying.
think that's what you're saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
livelihood.
No, you just said it.
God.
No, I didn't. You didn't hear the rest of what I said. What I said was when you have a culture, because I mean I live here, I saw it, I witnessed it live.
It doesn't matter whether you live there or not.
it does matter because
It
the
does
media-
matter. What are you talking about?
You were just saying what you saw on TV on BLM, but
No, I
What about the bear spray?
Hold on,
I
let her finish.
How do you think that bear
live.
spray is different than a fire?
No, I saw
Listen to
this
the
with
shit.
outside with my own eyes. I live in everything that was happening on Fairfax and right here in LA. I saw this outside with my own eyes happening. Okay. throwing Molotov cocktails into businesses, setting a whole neighborhood on fire,
Right,
setting
bad.
it ablaze. Okay,
100%
that's what I'm
bad.
talking about.
That's bad.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I'm talking about. The culture is
Destroying people's livelihoods and businesses.
We're
Yeah.
terrible.
Destroying
We
it.
all agree on that.
that's not a protest.
That's
That's
not
not a
a
protest.
No.
No, those are
That's
rioters,
a
right?
riot.
Perfect. Great. We agree.
That doesn't help. You know, they were protesting awareness for police brutality. So that message is lost when you're burning businesses and creating violence.
But you wouldn't say the Magna mission is lost when they storm the Capitol? That's you can make a distinguish there, but you can't at BLM.
But they didn't storm the Capitol. They were let into the Capitol.
Those
is what
windows
I'm
broke by
saying.
themselves.
Sorry?
Those windows broke by themselves.
David, they destroyed no businesses. They stopped the Capitol for a few hours a day.
No, but Mark, did they go
Come
when
on,
the doors
you're
were
comparing
open?
apples
Where
to
did they break
oranges.
them down?
It's fruit salad, and you're not making.
I put the link in the
I know.
chat. Everybody
line,
can
did-
watch that for themselves.
Did the protesters not break down the doors and the windows to get in?
That was not that. If you watch the video, because that's a whole nother week. Watch the
No,
video. We can have a
let me
conversation
get
on
this
that.
point blank. You are telling me point blank they did not break any windows or doors to get in the Capitol.
David,
Not just a
how
state.
can you compare breaking
comparing.
windows to destroying people's businesses they worked for their whole lives to get?
And
No,
you're
no,
gonna
Mark,
protest.
Mark,
Set on fire.
Absolutely insane.
No, I'm not defending. No, Mark. Let me explain how I'm putting those together. There's a group of people in any event that are going to exploit that for evil, right? I mean, hey, the rioters, I don't put them as BLM. I put them as rioters. They took advantage. Who knows if they were for the movement or not? Who cares? They were not representing the protest. They were violent, and they deserve all the prosecution we could throw at them. No doubt. I'm not for any violence. Anybody who took down a person's business, threw them all the cocktail at a police, did that. Go after them, find them, get the video, prosecute them, throw the book at them. I'm all for that. I'm not against that. What I'm saying is the BLM movement was huge, and I'm able to make the distinction that the rioters and that were a bad element of that. Now, if I go to the Capitol, much smaller, I'll accept that. There's this huge MAGA rally, but you're saying, no, that's all friendly. Just these people were bad who stormed. They weren't even bad who stormed. They were let in.
You're saying something I never said. Number one, if they went after the MAGA people and they arrested them on video footage, why aren't they going after all the rioters in all these cities that
They
destroyed
did. I think
people's
LA,
businesses?
they did.
No,
In
no.
Los Angeles, they did a
No,
great
Hey,
job.
this was
Harris bailed them
This
out.
was
She
a-
announced
this was-
people to bail them out.
In Los Angeles, they got video and we're going after lots of people who looted.
I haven't seen
no,
anything.
but
I'll
this
show
we're
you. They
talking.
went after them.
Okay.
This was nationwide though. This look at what happened in Minnesota. They torched. I have family in Minnesota. They torched Minnesota. Minnesota looks like an
And are you going to make
apocalyptic
right?
zone
And they've
now.
gone after some of the people who've done the violence. If they could catch people, they did. I'm happy to find a bunch of people who got
this is
arrested over
again,
BLM.
we're comparing
because they
apples
burned
to
down
oranges here.
Wisconsin or wherever you're talking about, they had the right to go do something to the Capitol.
Huh?
No, I'm not saying that either. I never
So
said
what's
that.
causing all our divisions now? I mean, I think everyone agrees that we're more divided than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Does anyone have any idea what's causing it?
I would say the lack of fact that we can't look at the same incidents
I
and
would
say
say
these are what happened.
I can well, if you watch the propagandized information that they're putting out on our mainstream media.
Wait, but what makes you
When
think
they
the video
start,
you showed
wait,
me
hold
isn't
on.
propaganda?
I'm answering
Let her
his
finish.
question. If you look at the information, the information, how they're reporting and sensationalizing what is going on in the world, and then you go off and you look at what you have. Ask yourself why they're suppressing information from alternative voices that aren't part of the mainstream. Why there's so many independent journalists out there that are on the street, that were on the scene live at the Capitol, were on the scene at the riots, that have their own independent channels, that were being deleted, that were being censored. The reason that it's happening is that they want to create what's the word I'm looking for? again, it goes back to the New World Order. They want everybody thinking on the same political frequency. They want everybody to think, because you always hear that terminology, we are one. This is what they want. They want everybody to have one way of thinking. They want one religion. They want a government they want everybody to think on the same.
You're talking about the white supremacist ideology.
Huh?
No, that's not true, Daniel.
A white supremacist ideology.
It's not a Democrat or liberal philosophy. I've never heard it.
That's not. I'm an independent. I just call it for what it is, for what I see. And I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. All I'm calling is what it is, what I've seen. And this is because like I said, I don't watch necessarily, I don't soak my head in mainstream media. I'm watching, just like you hear, you want to hear two sides of the story. I'm watching both sides. I'm seeing it's literally night and day. It's night and day.
So what's to say what you're saying isn't also propaganda?
I'm telling you what I'm seeing from the MSM perspective versus from the independent perspective, there's a difference between when you have people who are coiffed up sitting in front of a screen and they're being told what to say on a teleprompter versus these independent journalists that are out live, recording live, where you're hearing it from horse's mouth out there on the street, versus these people who sit behind a table with a camera and a teleprompter.
But they're editing that video, right? You're not watching 40 straight hours. The independent journalists, the people on the street, they're still editing it. Project Veritas.
I'm talking about live streaming. When they're recording live versus when you see you take, for example, the kids that in the Indian guy, I'm like drawing a blank on everything tonight.
Well, I'll give another example while you're thinking about it. In the People magazine article after the Capitol, they had a double page spread of the Capitol in flames. Capitol was never in flames. It's stuff like that all the time they skew, it's just not balanced. But this is why
that's the history of American journalism.
Right, but but
it's worse
with social media.
We started the British War on
how do you know it's worse? You've only been alive for how many years?
Why do you think how did we start the Revolutionary War?
I'm 50.
One of the main reasons we started the Revolutionary War was because the press drew an image of the British killing Americans. It was completely made up. It's happened forever.
No, but not on the level where you are purposely suppressing information. When you're suppressing people's voices. When I'm looking for,
you saw it all.
Pretty much.
But okay, so David, what I would say to that, we are not at the time of the Revolutionary War. We've come far as a nation, just like we're not at the time of slavery. So we are, if we are truly a country of freedom of speech, and the echo chambers keep polarizing us, we all lose. There's no credibility. There's no way to connect.
But Daniella, on that same vein, look at the media you posted on your website. Would you say those were biased? I mean, news. I
posted the right perspective and the left perspective.
On the website. I'll go to it and be happy to look at it and say those. I mean, who is in the middle? Tell me who is in the middle. Who do you think is a fair judge? I don't think you can come up with anybody, can you?
Okay. That's the problem. I'm not saying there is right. One person is right. I'm saying there is no opportunity to have conversation again. We're seeing this. They don't want fair. We're seeing this everywhere else. No one wants an actual conversation. Ben Shapiro has invited a bazillion Democrats and liberals to his show. A fraction of them say yes. CNN, MSNBC have no conservative journalists on there, so you don't get any other perspectives. And the mainstream media is left leaning, as you agree, David. And people are afraid to speak up with a different perspective, and that is a problem.
I got one thing to say because I have to leave in a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And that is, here's the biggest problem of all. And I watch Bill Maher every week, and he's got it right. If we don't wake up and work together, China's going to eat our lunch. The rest of the world's going to eat our lunch. So we can keep playing around with these stupid, he's a racist, she's an anti-Semite, he's this, he's that.
And Mr.
Let me
Potato
tell
Head's
you,
not a
we
man.
aren't going to work together. We are going to be finished as a country.
Yeah, I mean, just look at what cancel culture is. You were asking, Mr. Architect, you were asking how the culture was changing. My question is, who is cancel culture? Who are these people? And why are people giving them such
So much power.
a voice? They're
It's
giving them
you.
such
You're
a
cancel
presence.
culture.
Then why are
Daniela's
they?
cancel culture. We're all cancel culture.
We're not, but it's ridiculous. Who is? You're canceling Aunt Jemima. You're canceling ancient, because all of a sudden I grew up, using Aunt Jemima syrup. Now it's racist. What people don't realize is that you're erasing a legacy of a Black woman who was the reason why they had a face on Aunt Jemima. But now it's racist, but you're actually erasing this woman's legacy. Yeah. She actually was history, but because of this cancel culture, which I'm saying.
Yeah. And also, what was the lady's name in Gone with the Wind who won an Oscar for her performance?
Hattie McDaniel.
Yeah, and Gone with the Wind is now pulled. And we don't get to celebrate these women who've become.
Yeah, let's celebrate more plantation stories and more slavery stories.
No, you're missing it, David. They erased the history. They erased the history of an actress who was the first Black woman to win an Academy Award. Exactly. They missed the whole concept of that. They missed the whole concept of Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's, all of that. They're erasing history, and they're trying to gaslight and say that, well, this is for the good of all Black people. Well, when you got white people, when it's white people who are making these decisions for us, and it's like, well, no, you didn't come and consult us.
I mean, does anyone think it's okay to do away with history? Is there what should be the discussion before you get rid of, something from history?
You learn from history.
But
right.
On the same hand, yes, we learn from history, but we also put it back in context and say some things we should celebrate, some things we don't.
But this is the point. Go ahead, Mr. Architect.
Thank you. For instance, I'm Jewish, and Jews were slaves in Egypt thousands of years ago. And just, next week is Passover, where we honor the fact that we were slaves and we got our freedom.
Check out thematzah.com.
Right. And and so even though it's a very sad thing that we went through, we turn it into a positive thing. We turn the way we got the story of how we got our freedom into a really positive thing, and we honor that every year. We don't erase that from our history.
It took us 1,400 years to get there, though.
It took us a while to get there. I don't know how long, because I don't know when we started Passover, but I mean, I guess.
You know what? Yeah, if you take everything away, then you can't hold anything to its value. I mean, I watched 12 Years a Slave. If everything was gone.
That's racist, Daniella.
No,
you watched it. You watching it is racist.
Who do I think I am?
No, but I think putting context on things is critical. I have no problem. I mean, I don't think erasing is the answer, but I think putting things in context. Maybe, hey, I don't think I have no problem getting rid of spokespeople that I think are caricatures or have a sordid past. I have no problem with that.
But what were you saying, Daniella?
I think if you look to the past, and the expression hindsight is 2020, and you just focus on the imperfections of that time or the imperfections of that person, and not what was achieved, not what was visionary and forward-thinking at the time, then you have nothing. There's nothing to strive for now, because who's to say what happens now with these trailblazers now? In 10 years, we're going to find up something that we're going to say they're not worthy of their discovery and their movement, and we all lose. There's no context. So
some things that are racist are okay. Should we, I mean, if things were truly racist, imagery, policies, isn't it good to get rid of them?
No.
Isn't there a joke from communism that the future was always clear, it was the past that kept changing?
Right. I mean, so your country club should still segregate. You think that's a decent policy?
No, we're talking about where we are now. Like
I just said, right.
We're talking about the examples of Gone with the Wind. Okay. That from when I stand born in this generation, I'm not focused on the slavery part. I am focused on that this was the first Oscar from a Black person.
Who's getting rid of Gone with the Wind?
Sidney Poitier and all these people who were just breaking down the doors. If you don't put them in that right context and you take it all away because it shouldn't have happened to begin with.
Who's taking it away?
This is what I'm saying. Cancel culture.
Can I not watch Gone with the Wind right now?
There's a warning label.
It'll be hard to find.
That's what I'm saying. I have no problem with a warning label.
It was taken off of HBO.
A warning label for what though?
To say that it's in context, to explain that Disney just did this and they got lambasted when they moved 4 or 5 videos, the Muppets. I mean, you have an idiot on TikTok on your site about this that said, hey, there are stuff that we're not proud of. And these are situations of the size. You have your choice to show it to your kids or not. It's a little warning label, it puts it in context, but they're completely available to adults or people who could get past the clicking. What's wrong with that?
Okay,
what about the parental advisory on music?
Well, I was just going to say, Cardi B, Wet Ass Pussy is the most empowering song of the year, but Sesame Street gets.
No, but Daniella, my question is, do you want to cancel Cardi B? Is that your argument?
No, I don't want to cancel Cardi B, but I also don't want to be seeing her on a family-friendly Grammy show. So you would be okay if it was with a warning? If it's not in a public primetime show, she can do whatever she wants.
If you're showing 2 women doing basically a pornographic act, yes, there should be a warning because there's kids who are watching it
on public.
There's kids who are watching it at that hour, but we're comparing apples to oranges here.
No, we're not. Kids could watch anything on Disney around the clock.
Watching a Black woman win an Oscar during a time when it's almost unheard of to win an Oscar, you can't compare that to WAP. You don't need a parental advisory or a warning that a movie was made during a time of explicit slavery. You do. What's wrong with the warning? What's wrong with the warning with Gone with the Wind? What's wrong with the warning? A warning for what? A warning for what, though?
We're not just talking about a warning, though. We're talking. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
We're talking about a larger phenomenon of people being fired, canceled, books being removed from bookshelves. We're talking about actors, psychologists, authors, thinkers,
Dr. Seuss,
politicians, right? So what we're seeing, what people on the right are seeing is a much larger trend than just Dr. Seuss. It's authors, it's thinkers, it's doctors, it's lawyers, it's philosophers, psychologists, all. Every day you hear about somebody new being fired, a new book being taken off the shelf, a new movie. And so I guess I'm just trying to figure out, and you may not have seen all these examples. So, I mean, I guess I just want to know, when does it become a concern if it's not a concern yet?
Well, here's the thing. This is why I go back to saying we have a problem with information. When you have, like, it goes back to what I was saying, when you have
mainstream media.
when you have certain voices that are being censored because they don't side with what the current popular narrative is that's being touted around through your most powerful sources in media.
Oh, here we go.
This is the problem.
Who's being censored? You're able to watch all of them.
Well, yeah, because I know how to find them. I know how to source them out.
Censored.
Well, I mean,
no, you're missing what I'm saying. When they're being censored from your mainstream powerful sources like your primetime networks, all of your primetime cables, you have to dig like deep down. There's so many new, there's brand new there's all these new YouTube-esque outlets where people are moving to because their voices are being censored off of Facebook. Their
Off of
voices are being,
TikTok, off
I
of
mean,
everything.
look at Twitter. Twitter is notorious for, look what they did with Megan. What's the athlete Megan? What's her name? She got suspended from Twitter because she didn't believe that trans women should be playing in her sport. So the whole trans community came for her, mobbed her on Twitter. And the fact that she had a conversation with a transgender person, all she said was, "You were born biologically male," suspended. She got suspended off of Twitter because she stated a biological fact. This is what I'm talking about in terms of cancel. Yeah. She stated a biological fact and she got suspended off of Twitter.
Yes.
And
this is a woman from the LGBT community. She's an athlete of the LGBT community. And because she stated a biological fact, she got suspended.
So I have a list here.
Go ahead.
So Bari Weiss from the New York Times was, as I understand it, pressured to resign. Jordan Peterson, one of the most influential thinkers in Western psychologist, and one of the most influential thinkers in the Western world, has been, censored more times than he said something like 200 times. Brett Weinstein, evolutionary biologist, was forced out of Evergreen University. Yep. Dennis Prager and Prager University. He has I think something like 4 billion views for his videos, and
demonetized.
He says they're being demonetized and shadow banned. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas had a documentary which was removed from
everything but Apple TV.
So
I mean, even Robert De Niro got he did a documentary because there's interviews with him talking about the vaccine. He had questions. He wanted to get answers about it, but he was very skeptical of it. So he made a documentary that was basically researching and asking the questions, be it pro or con. They made him cancel airing of the documentary.
Just because he asked questions.
Because he wanted to investigate and explore the questions and explore the research. They said no, and this was his festival.
Yeah. So let's just bring it back. Let's just bring it back to the beginning of the hour, because I know we kind of went over. It was a very lively discussion. Can we all agree that when we have the freedom to ask questions, this is what breeds connection, communication, empathy, understanding, growth? Can we agree to that?
I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. I don't know who said that. It's a quote. It's not mine.
Yes. David, Daniel, can you agree to that?
That's a good one.
Repeat it for me.
That when we have the ability to ask questions, it promotes connection, empathy, understanding, new information, that it is a positive thing.
Questions is how we learn.
I was going to say yes and no. Okay. The ability to, if used correctly, yes, but oftentimes it's used divisively and not.
But having the space to safely ask questions without it being used against you, how can that at all be ever not? Can you give me an example?
There's pointed questions. There's questions without, if you ask, let's put it this way. If you ask a question, the assumption is that you're going to be open to an answer and open to discussion. Right now, I feel most people are asking questions with no opening and no dialogue. They're asking the question with the next answer in mind.
Right, because it's about...
So there is no dialogue if the questions aren't meaningful.
Well, that depends on who you're talking to, because I can ask a question and somebody will give me an answer, or they don't like my question, and then instead of answering the question, they'll attack you for just asking that question.
That's my point. I think if done right, yes, but I don't think it's necessarily asking questions is will lead to utopia.
But how do you ask a right question?
I think it's the first step, but I don't think it's a fail step.
how do you ask a right question? What's doing asking a question the right way?
The question, it's not the question. It's if my mind's made up and I'm asking questions with no ability to really have a dialogue, if I'm so one-sided that I'm just trying to press and trying to make you change, there's no question. The interchange isn't there.
So what I would say to that is probably because that person doesn't feel safe. And
Whatever reasons, I'm just saying.
Environment where we can ask a question, and I hear what you're saying about the component. There should be a curiosity component. There should be an openness components to learn a different perspective. And I think that's fallen on a lot of people. That's been very difficult to do because it means it could if their narrative is changed, they have to re-examine a lot of things. And sometimes people don't want to do that. But I am for conversation. I am for communication. Miracles can happen when you can communicate sincerely. And I don't feel there's a lot of opportunities to do that across the aisles. And when you see people like Sarah Silverman, Bill Maher, equally as fed up, that actually encourages me. And yeah. So let's just wrap it up. If everyone wants to say a final thought of the evening, go ahead, Daniel. If you have something that you'd like to end with.
I got nothing.
You got nothing. Okay, fair enough. Thank you for being here. Taji.
I just say think independently. Search outside of what's popular, because most likely what's popular, there's definitely a other side to what you think is popular. Just think outside the box. Think independently for what you're being bombarded with.
Yeah.
That's considered popular.
Yes. Be a free thinker. Thank you.
Yeah.
David.
I just want to move away from the theys, the thems, the others, the big boogeyman in the sky, and concentrate more on things that affect us. And most things are made by choices by people. And I'm not worried about a cabal running us. I think that we can move past that and move into the smaller issues and how things really work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And Mr. Architect.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate the chance to have a dialogue. I think, some of these issues are interesting and concerning, partly because, they are affecting us more than politics used to 20 or 30 years ago, in my opinion.
Yeah.
With the violence that we see, with people afraid to voice their opinions and so on. And I, having been born under communism and escaping that, I have some experience with it, and I see some parallels. So that raised some concerns with me. So I definitely want to try to understand, what is this phenomenon that's happening? Is it a cultural shift? Is it a divide? Is it deepening? Why? What's the cause? What's happening with it? Who's controlling it, if anyone? And if not, what does that mean? And how do we work towards understanding and peace, I guess.
Yes. And with that note, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful week. And until next time.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming, and God bless America.
God bless America.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of America's Voices. If you too would like to join in the conversation, find us on Facebook. The group is America's Voices. Be a part of the conversation. If you would like to be a part of a future episode, visit daniellabloom.com/America's Voices. We would love to have you. God bless you, and God bless America.